Britain is such a warning to us in so many ways. It's had mass immigration from Muslim countries and now huge pro-Palestinian protests. Some very threatening, even violent, with politicians also threatened with death. I mean, last week, former MP George Galloway, he won a by-election in a heavily Muslim area by campaigning against Israel very vehemently as a Hamas supporter too. And all this has been leading the Prime Minister to make this dramatic speech.
In recent weeks and months, we have seen a shocking increase in extremist disruption and criminality. What started as protests on our street has descended into intimidation, threats, and planned acts of violence. Jewish children fearful to wear their school uniform lest it reveal their identity. Muslim women abused in the street for the actions of a terrorist group they have no connection with. Now our democracy itself is a target. Council meetings and local events have been stormed. MPs do not feel safe in their homes.
And ironically, while he was doing that, you could hear protesters in the background trying to drown him out. Joining me from London is Esther Krakue, writer, broadcaster, commentator extraordinaire. Esther, thanks for your time. Why did your Prime Minister give that speech? It seemed really quite impromptu, you know, just dragged it out on a Friday evening and bang, there it was. What was that about?
Yeah, so the timing of that speech was quite suspicious. It was right after George Galloway stormed through the Rochdale elections. I mean, George Galloway won more votes than the Conservatives, the Lib Democrats, and the Labour Party combined. So clearly, he's shaken up the establishment in a significant way. And obviously, the main driver behind that vote and that victory was Gaza. He said, literally in his victory speech, this is for Gaza. So it kind of woke up Rishi Sunak. He didn't decide to give a speech when he was, giving the Metropolitan Police an extra £30 million to protect MPs who are being intimidated in their own homes, who are being harassed outside of Parliament. He chose to do it when he realised that actually there was a significant threat to the Conservative vote. And that's raised many eyebrows. Obviously, the speech was well received. He did say that the police need to actually start policing these protests instead of just managing them, putting up anti-Semitic hate chants and slogans, reflecting them off Big Ben. They're completely unacceptable. And he should have said this a lot earlier, but, the timing is very suspicious. But one of the things I have recognized with this George Galloway victory is the fact that the Labour, Lib Dem and Conservative establishment, I'm not talking about the things that he spoke about outside of Gaza. He talked about, reopening the maternity and A&E care unit in the Rochdale Infirmary. They didn't mention anything of that. He talked about supporting small businesses. The main party didn't talk about that at all. He talked about, community football and things that actually promote community feeling in Rochdale, and none of the major parties have talked about any of that. So yes, George Galloway is a crank, and unfortunately he did use the whole Gaza conflict to storm to victory. But actually there are real issues that George Galloway touched upon that none of the major parties have spoken about. He's really talking to sort of working class, white, patriotic, pro-Brexit communities in the country, and no one is talking about that.
A pity that it's just a friend of almost every dictator has met, from Saddam Hussein to whatever, and to Putin. But look, I take your point there. But the thing about Rishi Sunak's, your Prime Minister's speech, I would have thought it would be more appropriate to have given it after you had the Speaker of your Parliament say, hey, listen, I got to break the rules and let Labor MPs go on the record, saying this and that about Gaza because they are getting death threats and they could be killed. And I'm thinking, what has British politics come to, where people are so terrified of the protesters on the street, the death threats, that they break Parliament's rules and they're too scared of saying maybe what they really think? I mean, you have really got a problem if that's what the Speaker himself is saying.
Yes, Rishi Sunak should have given that speech after basically the first protest, the first time we saw people chanting anti-Semitic, rhetoric on the streets of London. That should have been the first time that Rishi Sunak had given this speech. It's long overdue. It took MPs having to be threatened, feeling unsafe in their own homes, being intimidated outside of Parliament. I was in Parliament last week. I kid you not, there was a secret passageway from Parliament outside into the streets of London with a lot of police presence, because apparently there has to be heightened heightened security because of all the intimidation. I had to be patted down. That never really happens anymore. They were like, we're patting down every single person, we're scanning you, all of that. Heightened security in Parliament because of all these protests and these intimidation. He should have spoken about this months ago, but unfortunately, he had to take George Galloway winning the election, the by-election in Rochdale for it to happen. And you're right, you know, it's very scary.
No, I'm hearing you. So true, yep. And I noticed he was a bit short on solutions as well. The King looks like coming to Australia around October. His cancer diagnosis delayed his initial plans. Is he really in shape to come here then? I mean, it's not confirmed, but we've got all these Republican politicians now climbing over themselves to say, come to my state or whatever.
Well, it's a bit touch and go at the moment because of the King's diagnosis. Obviously, he wanted to come in October to coincide with the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit, which will be a week-long summit in Samoa. And he was planning his first state visit as the King to Australia then. It's really interesting. Republicans here as well are actually pushing for the King to make that trip because they realize how important and how significant it is. You know, trade deals with countries like Australia was one of the big Brexit promises, and we're really hoping for the King to lay some good groundwork there.
Well, we have an Assistant Minister for the Republic, but he's gone very, very quiet because it seems the royal brand still works under King Charles, Esther.
Absolutely. And, you know, this is one of the things that people don't want to admit. The royal family are the ultimate ambassadors, and they do have a lot of value. But unfortunately, Republicans are just trying to use anti-Republican, anti-monarchy sentiments to try and toot their own horn. They cry, I laugh. I laugh at their tears. That's very ungracious of me. Esther Krakue, thank you so much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it.